Yes, the Bryants are back. All right. Happy Father's Day. Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. Thanks for being here. For good or for ill, we seem to learn about God from fathers. Often first in our lives, these larger-than-life characters who seem to have given and very frequently seem to hold the keys to sustaining our existence. They seem to give us, or we long for them to give us protection, provision, identity, and belonging. And these seem to come from them when they are healthy. I'm sure I learned about God from my dad young. I was baptized in a Lutheran church. I don't remember it. But one of my early strong memories of sort of hearing about God from my dad was when he was building a swing set on the side of our yard, and I can picture this vividly. It went well for about half of it, and then it was going very unwell, I remember, and he was not pleased with how it was going. And I did hear the word God, and I then sort of maybe learned some four-letter words as well. To my shame, I continue the same tradition, right? Huck and June can. The point is, Father's Day is tender. It can bring up joy for some, but it is also painful, and it brings grief for many others. My mom's dad was the latter, brought about a lot of grief for their family. So yes, we want to honor our fathers, but today, really what we want to do is put at the center those whose lives have been marked by the absence of a father, those who never knew their fathers, whose fathers were lost too soon, or those who carry wounds from their fathers where love should have been. One of our patron saints, Richard Rohr, writes, "The father wound is so deep and so all-pervasive in so many lives and cultures, it seems to be at the core of all woundedness." And yet Scripture and the story of Jesus tell us that the fatherless are not forgotten. They're not marginal to God. In fact, they're at the center of God's concern. We read last week the sort of grounding text for this series in Luke 4, where Jesus begins his ministry at his local church, which was the temple, by quoting from his Bible, which was the Torah, where he describes the year of the Lord's favor, what it's going to look and feel like when God's reign is on earth as in heaven. The year of the Lord's favor, he says, for the oppressed, for the blind, for the poor, and we might add, for the fatherless, right? Not Father's Day, but Fatherless Day is the year of the Lord's favor. These are the ones that Jesus has come for. And yes, pause, disclaimer, this is the second week in a row that I've gotten up as a straight, white, educated, wealthy, privileged man and talked about voices from the margins. The irony is not lost on me, and the hypocrisy is not lost on the church, nor is it acceptable for me still to be the one talking about this. That being said, not only do I also have a positive experience of my own father, I have such a good father, he's actually literally still here by my side, supporting me, playing music in the band this morning. And because of that, I plan on being the kind of father that is always around loving and supporting you guys. So while I can speak neither from the margin nor from the experience of the fatherless, it is something that Jesus actually talks about quite a bit. It's very important in his time, it's very important in his tradition and his practice, because it's something that was really significant to their understanding of God's faithfulness. And since it's Father's Day, it's worth us taking a few minutes to understand how this marginalized voice can shape our practice towards the fatherless, and how that has everything to do with our faithfulness to the marginalized today. I have this memory. You know how you have memories and you're not sure if you remember them or if you remember the story that's been told to you so many times? So the memory is we're flying somewhere. I think it's maybe upstate New York. Early memory, probably one of my first flights. And we're going through the airport and the family goes down the escalator and I don't. And I'm a little boy. And the family's at the bottom of the escalator. And so you have this I was thinking about it this morning. I should have used this when I was a much more conservative preacher for this really powerful image of being separated from the Father. So I'm at the top of the escalator. The family's gone down. I'm terrified, right? I'm untethered from my dad. And I'm not going down. So he goes up the down escalator, bloody knees and the whole bit. But he comes to my rescue, and I'm reunited. In the ancient world, to be fatherless was to be untethered, to have no protection, to have no inheritance, and to have no name. In the world of empire and in a world run by men, the father was everything. Everything. Without him, a child was vulnerable legally, economically, spiritually. This is why the Hebrew prophets continue to cry out, defend the cause of the fatherless. A father to the fatherless is God and his holy dwelling. Protection, provision, identity, and belonging, these were bound up in the Father in the ancient world. Right? It's not just a convenient metaphor that Jesus picks for God. There's a reason. This was the source of life as they understood it in their culture. In many ways, being fatherless was shorthand for being powerless, for being absolutely powerless. And Jesus emerges from this same, what's called a patriarchal context, a context run by men, where men have all the power. But Jesus flips that. He subverts it at every turn. He doesn't glorify what we think of today as the traditional family. Instead, he redefines it over and over. He says, who is my mother? Who are my brothers? Whoever does the will of God is my family. He goes on and says, I will not leave you orphaned. I'm coming to you. On that day, you will know that I am in my Father, and you in me, and I in you. They who have my commandments and keep them are those who love me. And those who love me will be loved by my Father. And if we had time, I'd do a longer sermon, but keeping his commands is love one another, right? Just before this in the Gospel of John, he says, this is how I summarize all of the commands, to love one another as I've loved you. So he says, when you keep that command, when you love one another, you experience the Father's love. Our experience of the Father's love is connected to our practice of loving one another. One of my mentors, Brian McLaren, says it this way: Jesus wasn't promoting family values, he was expanding family boundaries. Boundaries. How many people in the church have been hurt rather than healed by boundaries within families? He creates a new kinship, a new kingdom, not by blood, but by love and justice, through compassion and empathy and practice. Speaking of kingdom, not kingdom, but kingdom, coming through justice. Justice isn't always pretty. Sometimes we'd be fighting, right? Me and the brothers. I have an older brother and a younger brother. Close enough that fighting got serious in high school. We'd be fighting, and we would take it to my dad to arbitrate. And he would basically say, you're messing up the inside of the house. Go out front and fight it out in the yard. Work it out amongst yourselves, right? It wasn't something that he needed to be a part of. Sometimes that's God's justice, right? God says to us, stop wrecking this place and work it out, please. We talk a lot about our faith in God and the faith that's required of us. We don't talk nearly as much about God's faith in us to deal with some of our own problems. But my dad taught me that, right? Not just fight it out in the yard, but by example. And I couldn't be prouder of him and my mom, how active they are, not just attending their church, but leading in their church, leading Bible study in the church. They were out protesting yesterday downtown DeLand. Yes, thank you. Yeah, they believe we have a responsibility to join God in the work that we say we believe in. And so we took the kids and we cruised through downtown during the protests and cheered for them. This is an unsung necessity of being a good father. This is the tough but essential parenting part, right? In the same way that my dad looks at a country that he loves and he protests as a way of saying, you're better than this. You're better than this. Our country doesn't behave this way. We do not speak to one another. We do not carry ourselves this way. We don't threaten our neighbors. We don't disrespect strangers. And in the same way, my dad has had hard conversations with each of his boys when we needed it. When we were stuck, when we were settling, when we were lost. When we needed a father so badly, and think then about how many men didn't have one when they needed one. And this is not, playing catch and barbecue and lemonade fatherhood. This is hard. This is telling his sons, you need to change, right? This is not good. You're better than this. Don't go down this path. Or even more frequently, he would have enough faith in us to sit us down and say, look at what you're doing. And he would trust us to do the right thing. I can't imagine developing that sense of justice without my dad. And yet, Jesus experienced father absence personally. We don't think about that very much, but we see Joseph, his father, disappear very early in the story. Jesus' own origin is scandalous. He's born to an unwed mother. He's questioned by society. He knows how it feels to be dismissed, to be marginalized, and misidentified as a child and as a part of a family. But he doesn't project this wound onto other people, right? He doesn't go out hurting other people trying to fix what hurts in him. He heals the wound of fatherlessness through radical welcome. He blesses the children that others, especially his religion, rebuke. He calls God not just Father, the title, but Abba, which is a very relational, intimate, safe, more than anything, a safe name. This is not the wrath of God, right? Abba is against the chest of the Father. Can't be more intimate and warm and compassionate. My dad had a way of adopting the fatherless, these kids who had truly been disempowered by not having a healthy father figure, the way where they were getting raised. Wally and Jeff and Matt and Phil and Mark and lots of guys that I think he still talks to. The point is he showed up as a father, not in the sense that he wielded power over them, but that he showed up and gave it away. He empowered young men all around his three boys, right? Because it's not just his biological kids who can benefit from looking someone in the eye when you shake hands with them and finishing what you start and always putting your tools away and keeping your word because it's all you have. My dad was willing to be a dad to anyone who was interested in living how he lived. And how he lived was compelling to us. Just like Jesus says, anyone who wants to live in this way is the beloved of the Father. And this is not, listen, don't misunderstand me, this is not about idealizing patriarchy. It's about reimagining belonging, right? Jesus takes what was exclusive power in the structure of patriarchy and he cracks it open. And he says what was bound up only for those with a father is now available to everyone because God is now the Father of all. Who are the fatherless today, though? Let's say we believe this, we put our faith in this message, and we say we should practice this as a congregation. To be fatherless today can mean so many things. As you imagine, the world is so much more complex than it was a couple thousand years ago. A child whose dad is incarcerated by a system that disproportionately targets black and brown fathers. A child whose father was deported by a zero-tolerance policy at the border, or these ICE raids, these Trump-era decisions that literally rip children from. I can't describe the hell to which I would go at the thought of someone trying to take my kids from me. The kids whose parents were killed by a police system that talks about serving and protecting, but really means surveilling and punishing. Children raised in poverty, not because their fathers are lazy, but we live in an economy that hoards wealth and calls it virtue. If you've got to work 2 or 3 jobs to pay rent, you don't have the luxury of parenting. And so many children in homes and in faith communities where violence has replaced care, where fear has replaced tenderness. For these father wounds that linger and bind us, Lord, in your mercy, hear our prayer. And to be fatherless today also means something spiritual. The adult who still longs for the blessing of a father they never received. I had a friend a decade ago that wrote a book called God is Unconscious. And the primary idea of the book is the idea that if you have this sort of father that you grow up always trying to please, you can never quite please them. When the father dies, does it set you free from that need to please them, or does it make that need infinite, right? Is that father always watching over you, always wanting you to have achieved what you never achieved? And he sort of says that can become this destructive understanding of God. And we can live with these same kinds of father wounds, of this unfulfilled affirmation. The queer child that's cast out by a faith that weaponized the word father. The community member who's rejected because of who they are, who they love, what they believe. Richard Rohr says, we all carry a deep need for a fathering energy, a presence that protects, affirms, and welcomes us into being. I was sharing with my family yesterday. I just recently watched this stand-up comedy by a comedian called Mike Birbiglia, and in it, he's sort of processing his dad aging, and he's had a stroke, and he's sort of doing comedy about this really heavy sort of life stuff. So I watched the stand-up, and then I also heard him interviewed on Conan O'Brien, and he was talking about the experience of sort of coming to terms with what was a pretty tough childhood, and his dad being, really successful, but not really around, and then his dad has a stroke, and he's dealing with his dad, really losing a lot of kind of this mythic figure status. And he says this, he says, over the course of this, I learned to empathize with my dad. I used to see him as larger than life, and now I'm able to see him more as a person. I wonder if we don't need some more of that in our theology. Not more of God as larger than life, right? God the Father who can do anything and be anything and solve anything. But maybe more of the humanity of God, right? Because that's really the Jesus story, is that this larger than life God is actually one of us, is actually relatable, is actually here in in the eye contact, and here in crying together, and here in laughing together, and here in wrestling through life's toughest challenges and greatest joys. The humanity of God. And so he humanizes us as Father, and I think maybe we can really celebrate that, because if you had a good dad, celebrate even more, because he's just a man. Right? He's just a person. This larger-than-life character is not something that any human father could live up to, and it may not be the healthiest way to think of God, the Father, all the time. If you had a good dad, celebrate even more, because he's just a man. If you had a bad dad, you very likely had a hurt man who was in a long line of people deeply wounded by fathers before them. And the question is, will you choose to step out of that tumultuous river? Can we, and I don't know that we can, but this is why we come to church, this is why we hold ourselves open and ask God, can we turn that pain and that judgment into compassion? Right? What feels so dark and cold and twisted, can we let it become warm and light? Do we trust that God can do that even when we can't? And what do we do with this as the church? What do we do with this as a community? It's Father's Day, so we name it, right? First and foremost, we don't ignore this pain, and we don't parade through here singing the traditional father song in a culture that's suffering under this crippling weight of the absence of good fathers. As followers of Jesus, we bring it into the light, and we say to anyone who experiences in any form this kind of disempowered fatherlessness, you are not abandoned, you are seen, you are beloved. We become the hands of the one who says, I will not leave you as orphans, I will come to you. And we embrace these same practices that we see in the Father, in Jesus' world and in the ancient world. First of all, protection. Who are the fatherless today that need our protection? And who can we protect because of our power and our privilege and our resources? We can advocate for migrant families. We can work to reform systems of incarceration. Before I was on the Affordable Housing Trust Fund Committee, I worked with the school to prison pipeline and looking at how we're putting these kids from elementary school right into this system. We can speak up for children when they're being harmed, right? This is a part of our call as the church, is to protect the fatherless. Provision. We can support mutual aid programs. We can donate to these foster and reentry programs. Wherever we're able, we can step in and disrupt cycles of generational poverty. Through my day job, I get to work with a number of different organizations who are trying to address this. Food security in our community and in the world is a serious issue. I think that the state budget, have a good day, man, good to see you. The state budget for food security, I want to say I learned this week, was cut from like 160 million to about 80 million. Those are kids that aren't going to get fed in schools. My friend who run the neighborhood center over in West Volusia, they've got these shelters that are full, and the bulk of them are full of women and children, right? The fathers aren't around, and they're trying to make a way. Can we help with the provision for the fatherless? Identity. This is more than just naming the dignity of every child, because it's easy for us to say that, all children matter, we should have programs. But will we be mentors? And not for everyone. I'm not saying sign up for a program and do the thing. Can you invest in one person? Is there a person that you might mentor who needs you to be that? Can we be people who bless the fatherless, who can be second dads and chosen aunts? How many adopted grandfathers have you got, Joe? I mean, this is a world you can choose to live in. And finally, community. This is us, right? We make a church where we choose and we say regularly that no one is orphaned. Because what you need from a healthy father, come and find here. That's what the church should be for you. Create a kinship that can heal this isolation and this sense of abandonment. We must not just preach family, we must be it. So yes, honor the good fathers, hug them if you can, if they're in the room, call them, bless them, thank them, but also let's be people who shape our practice around hearing from the voices of the marginalized, the voices of the fatherless, and acknowledge that this is also Jesus' voice. That if we will listen, we'll hear the voice of Christ in the voice of the fatherless. And when we listen, we will hear the Spirit whisper to us, "You are mine, you are not forgotten." And in your healing is holy ground. Amen. Happy Father's Day.